I'm Purav Desai. I've been in IT for coming up to 10 years now, I think. But cyber specifically been over 3 years, and span sort of various roles in terms of like SOC analyst, vulnerability management, risk management, deployment, and currently doing incident response. But yeah, mostly it's been involved with the sort of Microsoft stack. And it's a good question. So initially, when I was in desktop support, I noticed like a lot of roles being sort of outsourced, and I wanted like a role where there was less chance of that happening, right? So cybersecurity kind of appealed to me. But initially, it was quite hard to get in. So what I did is I basically went on sort of a boot camp course to kind of learn Network Plus, Security Plus, and CEH. What's important to stress is that I don't have any of those certifications, so I didn't actually complete the exams. But what I did do is I got like immerse myself with the content for those courses, and more importantly, I built sort of a network with the other students in that course, and some of us are still friends to this day. And basically, then what I did is I kind of applied that knowledge that I learned in sort of home labs, using like virtual machines and stuff at home, and then just demonstrated that in interviews. And yeah, eventually a company took a chance on me, which was Cyberint, and I'll forever be grateful to them for that. And yeah, the rest is kind of history. But it was quite tough to break in, definitely, because a lot of people wouldn't take you seriously without certifications or experience. But I'm just glad that I was able to sort of demonstrate through just basically playing around at home and learning myself. So yeah, that's a good question. I think nowadays coding is sort of being taught at early ages, right? So almost the way to think about cybersecurity, if you've got like a natural curiosity for things, you'll kind of do well in it. So to appeal to kids, maybe code breaking. Like I remember when I was younger, with websites where you could kind of guess people's passwords or sort of reset them to almost kind of hack them in a way. Like someone's secret question would be like, "What's your favorite football team?" And you'd know that their favorite football team was, let's say, Arsenal or Tottenham or whatever, and you'd put that in, and then you'd be able to reset their password. So early on, those kind of things would inspire that curiosity and definitely make it more appealing. But I think it was already sort of being taught at the curriculum, but at sort of very high level. The other thing I think that could be done is like more interactive content. So, like gamify it. There's a lot of kind of cybersecurity, like hands-on games that appeal to kids as well. I don't have any at the top of my head, but I have seen a few. And then additionally, maybe just getting kind of influencers. Like I know, for example, TikTok is massive, right? So maybe some cybersecurity kind of influencers to do that content for young people, especially on like YouTube and TikTok and things could also help. But I think the main thing is just getting kids into sort of code breaking or creativity, kind of those elements that would then lend themselves well to cybersecurity. But good question. Initially, you need a good networking foundation. And this is kind of why I went on that bootcamp for Network Plus, because when I was in desktop support previously, some of people would talk about like IP ranges and subnets and stuff, and I couldn't really follow it. And with cybersecurity, you're kind of securing networks as well, like from firewalls and understanding data flows and things like this. So a networking solid foundation is very important. The other thing is what I alluded to earlier with your previous question around curiosity. So you kind of need to have that natural curiosity. If you're someone that likes diving deep into things, understanding why things work, maybe breaking things and putting them back apart to kind of really understand them, you'll go far. So curiosity is another one. Um, and then the other skill I'd say, just kind of looking back, is reporting and understanding kind of why cybersecurity is needed in a business. So even if your business is, let's say, manufacturing, have an appreciation for the fact that if you don't secure your business, then other companies could steal your manufacturing contracts, or data that you have that's proprietary to you could be stolen. So understanding kind of where cybersecurity plays a role in your business. And then in terms of technical skills, like, yeah, obviously you kind of need to know how certain tools work. So get some hands-on, like I did in my home lab, with understanding, whether it's penetration testing with Kali Linux, maybe spinning up a SIEM solution, so your security information and event management, get an idea of where the logs are going, get an idea to interpret the logs. Yeah, so those are the main few I'd say off the top of my head, like networking, reporting, curiosity, and sort of basic security fundamentals as well. Yeah, so again, going back to the kind of what I just said, right? Understanding where cybersecurity plays a role in your business and what role you're doing. So when I was a stock analyst, obviously I was on the front line. So I knew, for example, if I missed an attack, or I didn't deal with it in the right way, then it could cause further sort of ramifications for the company. So I felt proud on the fact that I was kind of like the first line to kind of get that alert or incident and kind of deal with it. So that's one way I added the value, just to kind of prevent those breaches and stop the attack, as it were. When I was doing vulnerability management, I knew that, for example, I was helping strengthen the defenses of the organization. And what I learned back then is like defenders are getting better at protecting, but companies are sometimes oversighting their infrastructure. So they're leaving it open to the internet, or they're leaving certain weaknesses, and attackers will take advantage of them. So where added value there was just identifying those weaknesses and helping companies to patch them and remediate them efficiently. When I was doing risk management, the value that I added was to help like projects get across the line, because projects need security approval. So I kind of made efficient sort of checklists that companies would abide by, and clients would abide by. And then if those sort of standards were met, then I could easily approve them. And EDR deployment, again, you're kind of building your defenses. So, for example, without an EDR tool, the company may not have known that this behavior occurred, which then led to an incident down the line. So, me sort of deploying that tool strengthened their defenses again. And currently in incident response, the value that I'm adding is just, helping with dealing with sort of incidents as they occur. Again, it's already gone through sort of level one, level two, level three. So you're almost like an escalation point, and kind of the buck stops with you for the most part. So you really need to dive deep and fully understand exactly what's happened, from initial kind of access all the way to persistence and exfiltration. And ultimately just, yeah, again, helping stopping breaches, and also maturing the organization, because I've sort of been brought in to help them with their M365 sort of incident response capability, which is still kind of emerging. So I'm adding a lot of value in terms of just bringing my previous experience to a mature organization. Like Microsoft Security Stack has always been my favorite. I think dealing with sort of Sentinel and MCAS and Defender from early back as a SOC analyst really inspired me to go down the Microsoft security journey. And what's really interesting is, they've acquired sort of a lot of sub companies and then kind of made it into their own products. But what's really good is just how everything integrates well. Like once you have the E5 license, all the products kind of talk to each other. So I really have a personal sort of affinity for Defender for Endpoint, which is the EDR tool, because that's come up most in most of my roles. When I was a SOC analyst, just doing basic sort of triage. But then when I was doing vulnerability management, I was a bit more on the back end, like forming queries and things like this. And when I was doing EDR deployment, I was basically onboarding customers to Defender for Endpoint. So that's always been a consistent kind of in my roles. In terms of least favorite tools, not so much a cybersecurity tool, but an IT sort of ticketing management tool, which is BMC Remedy. And I used that for a previous client. And yeah, the user interface was kind of looked like it was built in the 90s or 80s even. It just wasn't that user friendly. And it took a lot of kind of clicks to get to something, whereas within, for example, a modern ticketing system like ServiceNow, it would be far easier. So yeah, I wouldn't want to see Remedy again, definitely. People used to laugh sort of Windows Defender out. You wouldn't kind of take it seriously like you would, let's say, Kaspersky or McAfee, Norton as well. But I think kind of what I alluded to earlier is like they've acquired a lot of sort of Israeli startup companies, which have been really forward thinking and kind of made them into their products. So one example is like Hexadite. So Hexadite, as the name suggests, like there is a hexagon element to it. And what Microsoft have done is within the investigation graph, it's in the shape of a hexagon. So they're still kind of paying homage to Hexadite. But what Hexadite really did was the artificial investigation. And so now Defender for Endpoint, when there's an alert, you can kick off an automated investigation. And under the hood, that's using Hexadite's technology. Another one is CyberX. So CyberX was a agentless solution for OT scanning. And what they've done is they've brought that within Defender for IoT, whereas previously you needed kind of agents to scan. Now they've got like agentless capabilities. So, and also what we can't forget is that they invest $1 billion into cybersecurity every year, right? So their sort of investment portfolio is massive in that space. And I think with, things recently like ChatGPT, Security Copilot, etc., they're really well versed to be sort of leaders in cybersecurity industry. And I think Gartner, which typically assesses all these vendors and sort of big players, has always put Microsoft as sort of a leader. So I really think people need to kind of, respectfully speaking, put more respect on Microsoft's name in cybersecurity space, and really see them as a contender, because they're doing really great stuff. And the way all the products kind of integrate and the amount of enrichment and data you get is just, unparalleled. It does enable a lot of productivity, right? For example, things that would take maybe a week to review or something, ChatGPT can do very quickly. I think what we need to be cognizant of, and a lot of people are aware of this, is just the amount of data you're putting out there and what's actually happening with that data. So we saw recently Samsung suffered a data breach where they had their own source code put into ChatGPT, so whether how it's being secured on the back end is still a bit of a mystery, but ultimately, once you put that data out there, you don't know exactly how it's being used. And GDPR is very clear that if you use the data for a specific purpose, you need to kind of specify that. ChatGPT is kind of opening up that to a bit of a disaster, at least with the Samsung case. So I think companies can use it, but you just need to be responsible about it. Maybe some sort of vetting process, like making sure what you're putting there isn't proprietary or confidential. If you're just using it to gather sort of market insight and things, it can be useful. But also, what we have to bear in mind is it's taking kind of articles and things as its source, right? So there was a lot of fake news, for example, a few years ago. That's kind of influencing some of its decisions and some of its outputs. But it's a very interesting piece of tech, and ultimately it could potentially replace quite a lot of jobs, which is quite concerning. But it's also quite exciting to see how things can improve. Every sort of technological kind of advancement will have ups and downs, right? Um, but yeah, I think it's a good time to kind of learn more about it and dive deeper. But yeah, from a security perspective, it's definitely something to potentially use, but use responsibly. And put in those checks and balances where possible to limit any sort of data being exposed. An interesting one, because when I first wanted to break into cyber, I've heard all the spiel about, oh, you won't get taken seriously without a cert and things like that. And I did manage to break in, as countless others have, without a cert. But what I realized was, as you kind of get higher up in your career, like there's no easy way to differentiate between one candidate from the other without the certs. And especially when you're looking for jobs, some companies won't even give you an interview without certain certifications. So basically, in my previous place, Adama, I got the SC200, which is the Microsoft Security Operations Analyst certification. And that was, there were a couple of reasons for that. One, it did help the company with their sort of partnership with Microsoft. But two, it kind of helped solidify the knowledge that I'd built up through just hands-on engagements in the previous roles. And then following that, I also got the MS500, which is the Microsoft 365 Security Administration. And then this year, because my role is more on the compliance side, I've got the SC400, which is Microsoft Information Protection Administrator Associate. So I'm slightly biased in terms of Microsoft for the certifications. And maybe, there are a few skeletons in my closet in terms of like Network Plus, Security Plus, and CH, which I'd like to clear at some point. But yeah, I think for now, those are the three that I hold, and we'll see where things go. Yeah, so I think just breaking in because of how difficult it was, right? Like I still remember when I was in desktop support, considerably lower salary, considerably harder work, more hands-on, etc. And I was just like, things are getting outsourced. This is quite concerning. How am I even going to move to an industry? So I think that has definitely been the biggest achievement, just to know that I took it upon myself. I left desktop support without having another role lined up, which is quite risky. But took it upon myself to enter that boot camp and studied on my own to kind of then do the home labs at home and practice, and then going through countless interviews to finally get a chance. I think that was definitely my biggest achievement, just to break in. The only other thing I can say is when I was doing vulnerability management. So Rebecca, you might not be as familiar, but what you need with vulnerability management is to understand CVEs. And you may be asking, what are CVEs? So CVEs are common vulnerability and enumeration, which is a kind of way to identify weaknesses and vulnerabilities, right? I didn't even know what that was. And there was me kind of presenting to key CISOs for vulnerability management. So there was a very steep learning curve there. And within space of a month, I had to kind of accelerate my learning and really get good at this to kind of speak to clients and things. So that was definitely a kind of proud achievement. But I think the main one was probably just breaking in the first place because of how difficult and challenging it was. Yeah, so I mean, there is another Microsoft cert that's on my list, right? So that's the SC100, which is Microsoft Cybersecurity Architect. I think twofold because I've already kind of met the prerequisites for it. There are certain prerequisites you need to meet, like SC200 or MS500, etc. And I've got those. But I think just being known as sort of a cybersecurity architect kind of differentiates you in the industry. Like if you're an architect, you can kind of do things end to end. You can envision certain scenarios and help clients with it. So from a Microsoft perspective, that's definitely on my list. But I think in terms of being more all-rounded, I'd like to do an AWS certification potentially as well. So maybe like the cloud practitioner, because we are kind of using AWS in my current place, and just to keep up with conversations and things like that. And then the other one is Splunk, because I've used Sentinel as a SIEM product, but I've never seen any other SIEM. And again, just to kind of round out and become a bit more, open to other tools rather than sort of being a Microsoft fanboy, Splunk would also be good. So yeah, those potential three would be in my near future, hopefully. this talk wasn't meant to kind of scare people, right? Some people may see like, oh wow, it's quite intimidating to break in. I think just pick one area and kind of go at it. So if if you're completely new to cybersecurity or IT, get the IT fundamentals first. So maybe look at something like the A plus, or just watch YouTube videos online about the A plus to get some content ideas. The key thing, like I said, is get some hands-on at home. You've got countless ways to spin up VMs and even in the cloud now. So there's no real excuse for kind of not getting that hands-on. And also, like I said, the key thing is probably to remember what role cybersecurity plays in your business. If you kind of understand where your work has an impact, like in a wider reach, you're not only going to be empowered to do your work well, but it will also help you align to business goals. And ultimately, if you request something and it doesn't align to a business goal, it's more likely to get shut down. Whereas if it does align to your business goals, you can almost be like, well, do you want to achieve X goal? If you don't give me Y, I'm not going to achieve X goal, and then you're going to be liable. So, kind of understand where your business goals are and where your role aligns to it, I think would be key, especially for newcomers. So if you get your first cybersecurity role as a SOC analyst, understand that you're on the front line, understand that, without you, attacks could widespread and, get worse. But also understand where your business wants to focus on and try and align your methodologies and actions to that.